came to a crashing halt due to COVID-19. While we did have some reprieve in many parts of Ontario where young athletes were able to participate in limited return to play, where an NHL hub city and an eventual Canadian League and NHL and AHL occurred in Toronto and Ottawa, where we got our high performance and Olympic athletes up and ready so that they can compete in Tokyo, last Friday marked the beginning of a return to play for minor sports and recreation as we moved into Step 1 across the province. Presently, the roadmap to reopen allows for outdoor drills and dryland training with no contact or games in Step 1. There is a relief for many athletes, coaches, fans, and parents like myself who want to see the physical and mental well-being of our children through active participation in sport return. Today, I'm announcing an accelerated path for return to play for 18 leagues in 6 different sports, as well as international and single sports for professional and elite amateur athletes. Prior to the most recent lockdown, the work we were doing with the CFL, OHL, CEBL, and others helped create a framework for return to play, setting out minimum requirements for organizers and operators. These leagues include the American Hockey League, the Canadian Elite Basketball League, the Canadian Football League, the Canadian Premier League, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, the National Basketball Association, National Hockey League, the National Lacrosse League, National Women's Hockey League, the NBA G League, Professional Women's Players Events, and USL League One. The following elite amateur sports leagues that would also be eligible through this framework are the Canadian Hockey League, Elite Basketball League of Ontario, League One Ontario, the Ontario Scholastic Basketball Association, Ontario Junior A Lacrosse League, Ontario Women's Field Hockey Lacrosse, and Provincial Women's Hockey Team. We'd also allow for international sports events exemptions that would permit events like the National Bank Tennis Open to return. The key features of this framework would require local support from their Chief Medical Officer of Health, travel and quarantine for 7 days, cohorting, COVID testing and screening, distancing and masking and other individual controls, dedicated facilities and venues, cleansing and disinfecting, travel and transportation protocols, accommodations on food and beverage protocols, which would adhere to the Return Ontario Act regulations, limited staffing and volunteering, adherence to broadcast rules under the ROA, practice training and competition protocols, and education, awareness, and compliance and enforcement efforts. At the present, we are still working with the Chief Medical Officer of Health on what fans and stands will look like for both sports and entertainment. Today's announcement is a positive step forward and builds on the work we have done with the NHL. That means there is a path forward for the Toronto Blue Jays, the Toronto Raptors to come back home, if the federal government permits, allows for our Red Blacks, the Ticats, the Argos, and our OHL teams and others, given our present health conditions. As sports minister, I've been waiting for this good news for the past 16 months. As a fan, I'm elated, and as a hockey mom and trainer, I'm relieved. So, on June the 12th, 2021, today is the day Ontario athletes and sports fans can finally say out loud, "Let's play ball." Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and we'll go to the telephone lines for questions. First question, please.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, should you have a question, please press star followed by 1. Your first question comes from Chris Rishowie from the Toronto Star. Chris, please go ahead.
Oh, hi there. Good morning.
Hi, Chris.
Hi. I'm just wondering what and when we can expect to learn more about amateur sports, about kids' sports and their return. What are you looking at on that front?
Yeah, so amateur children can now start to go out and play with drills as well as dryland training. As we advance into Step 2, there will be a limited return to play, no contact. And by the time we get to Step 3, we should be seeing at some point in August a return to play with controlled environments. That said, the work is ongoing. We continue to work with our provincial sport organizations as well as the Chief Medical Officer of Health. Today's announcement is about an accelerated path forward for 18 different sport leagues in 6 different sports, and we've been working with the provincial sport organizations as well as with the national sport organizations to ensure that we've got the protocols in place. At this time, we're not looking at accelerating anyone else simply because we want to continue to limit mobility and the opportunity for COVID-19 to continue to spread. But I think today's news is certainly really good news for sports fans and for our professional and elite amateur athletes.
Thank you. And thanks. I'm just wondering what sort of the biggest obstacles have been in establishing these protocols. Has it been the cohorting? What are some of the things that you've had to deal with?
Look, it's quite lengthy. There are a number of protocols in place that we have to look at, whether that is distancing, individual measures, quarantine, local support for the league to return, the COVID testing that's starting to occur more and more likely, and we had great success with the NHL, both with the bubble but as well with the Canadian League. We have to make sure that there are stringent protocols in place for venues so that they are clearly clean and disinfected where appropriate, allowing athletes to have their own individual spaces. I'll give you an example with the NHL. We actually had, their proposal was so detailed, it was, I believe, 600 pages in order for the Canadian League to occur, where we actually had protocols in place for the players and how they were transported back and forth to both their arenas and to their homes, etc. So there are a lot of details into this, and we finally, I think, have come to a place where we can say now to the Red Blacks, the Argos, the Ticats, we're in a position to get you back onto the field. Similarly with the NBA and the Major League Baseball, to our Blue Jays and to our Raptors, if they choose to come home and the federal government allows for that, we could see them coming back. And so I think a lot of work has gone into this. The conditions in March changed rapidly underneath our feet, so we were not able to accelerate it at that time. But today things have changed. Our case counts are much lower. Many more people have vaccines, and we believe we've got the framework in place that will allow us to greenlight these leagues.
Thank you, and we'll go to the next question.
Next question comes from Graham Richardson from CTV Ottawa. Graham, please go ahead.
Hi, Graham.
Hi there, Minister. Just for clarity then, if I'm a fan, I'm no closer to being in the stands. But the teams like the Red Blacks, the Ticats, and the Argos, and baseball now have permission to operate and practice in their facilities?
Yeah, so they'll be able to operate and practice and eventually get into games through the cohorting. The plans will come in place, and the Chief Medical Officer of Health will make the recommendation. Cabinet would approve it, and I think we're at a point where we're having very good conversations about fans and stands. We have worked with a number of groups like the Senators, the Red Blacks, all of the OSA group actually, as well as MLSE and others. And I believe we have a team of 7 or 8 folks that are advising us on what the jurisdictional scan looks like in other places. We do know we are looking at live events as well, what that would mean. That would come, I think, a little bit later in the framework. The idea today, however, was really to accelerate a return to play for those leagues so that they could have some certainty in planning. And I'm very mindful of the fact that we want to host the Grey Cup in Ontario, and the Ticats in Hamilton are getting ready for that. So this provides a lot more certainty and clarity for them, and allows us to have, I think, a lot of hope after we moved into step 1 last Friday, that there will be a broader return to play on the horizon, and hopefully that will include spectators at a ticketed event.
Follow up?
Okay, and so obviously you're not in a vacuum here. We saw what happened with the Montreal-Toronto series, and I appreciate the healthcare workers were fully vaccinated indoors. I don't think that would have happened if Quebec wasn't happening. You have Alberta now saying July 1, everything's off, essentially full stadiums for the Elks and for the Stampeders. So I'm just wondering, I don't see a scenario in August where our CFL teams would be playing in front of empty stands if other jurisdictions are going the opposite direction.
Well, look, I'm not at liberty right now to discuss where we are in the process. I just have a great sense of optimism and hope that we will be in a position at some point in time as we advance through the various steps to start to see this. That policy work is being done. We have the right people around the table, both within government and within the sector, and so we continue to look at that. We're not in a position, however, today to announce what that would look like. Nor when that might occur, but we certainly are continuing those conversations. And again, we aren't Alberta and we aren't Quebec. Ontario has its own distinct challenges with COVID-19. We saw them play out over the fall, the winter, and of course early this spring. We are hopeful and we are mindful that as many more Ontarians get vaccinated, as many more Ontarians are free from COVID-19 and recovering, that we'll be in a better position. But the health and well-being of the province of Ontario is our number one concern, and where we are able to safely reopen, we will. And I say this because both in terms of fans and stands, that applies both in my sports portfolio, but also in my culture and tourism portfolio. And so want to make sure that we're all in alignment. But I think hope is on the horizon. And today's announcement, I think, is a very positive first step in that acceleration of a return to play for our professional and our elite amateur athletes.
Thank you, and we'll go to the next question.
Your next question comes from Justin Dunk from CHCH TV. Justin, please go ahead.
Hey, Justin.
Hi, Lisa. Just wanted to check on the CFL return to play overall. So you have signed off on them getting back on the field, which means that the Ticats, the Redblacks, and the Argos could hold training camp when they're planning to in July?
Yeah, so they just would have to meet the key features of the framework, which includes local support. So the local public health unit would have to sign off in Hamilton, in Ottawa, and in Toronto. We'd have to make sure that they put in place strict travel and quarantine rules of 7 days isolation. They'd have to cohort, essentially adopt many of the practices that the NHL and AHL had to in order for their accelerated return to play. So we've basically created a framework in order for them to do that. And they've all been around the table. Scott Mitchell, for example, has been, Nick Eves from MLSE, and of course Mark Goody from the Ottawa Sports Entertainment Group have all been a part of these discussions, and they've been briefed on this framework, and I feel that they're confident that they can adhere to that. So we'll start to see those plans coming in place, and then the Chief Medical Officer of Health will make the final determination. But as of today, they are included in this framework, and if they're able to meet that criteria, then we'll start to see them back on the field.
Follow up?
And do you see that happening within that timeline by July when they do want to get to training camp? Because I would imagine they have an idea of the framework that you laid out today.
Absolutely. We've had MLSE, the Ticats, the Redblacks. We've had many other organizations like the Blue Jays around the table. So they are aware of what these protocols are and what the framework entails. And so it will just be up to them to put that in place. But many of them have been, wanting to get back for the past year and a bit. So, I think that many of the plans will be underway. So I'm confident that they'll be able to meet these standards because they've been part of the process.
Thank you. And we'll go to the next question.
Your next question comes from John Childley Hill from the Canadian Press. John, please go ahead.
Hi, John.
Hi, good morning, Mr. McLeod. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure, always. My first question is, how tied to Ontario's overall COVID-19 numbers and the three steps of recovery is this accelerated return to play? Like if Ontario, I hope this doesn't happen, but if Ontario stalls out, let's say in step 2, would that affect this accelerated return to play plan?
This framework is part of the roadmap to recovery in Ontario. As long as they meet these proposals and this framework, they'll be able to continue on. We wanted to provide them with certainty and clarity. I think the step that might be delayed would be the fans and stands piece. We really continue to monitor health conditions, and that is what is restricting us at this point. And so those conversations are ongoing and will be predicated on public health measures at the time. But in terms of the return to play play here. We're really pleased that the Blue Jays, the Raptors, the OHL, and many others have been given the green light to go ahead and present their plan and be eligible for return to play. And I think it's much needed, and I think it signals a great deal of hope to Ontarians.
Follow-up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my follow-up is, you mentioned that obviously Major League Soccer, Major League Baseball, and the NBA, that's going to be conditional on the federal government addressing travel restrictions for those teams. But I'm curious about the Ontario Hockey League, which does have teams in the United States. Do you know, will those American teams play in Ontario or practice in Ontario until those restrictions are lifted, or is that part of the OHL's return to play?
Well, the OHL will have to present their return to play. I haven't heard what their most recent iteration would be. It's likely a showcase. If players were to cross the border, that would be up to the federal government to allow them to. If they're already in Canada, then I think that they wouldn't have to deal with the quarantine issues as well as the federal legislation. Right now, and we've always said this, we're concerned with the OHL teams in the province of Ontario.
Thank you. We'll go to the next question.
Your next question comes from David Haynes from Queen's Park Briefing. David, please go ahead.
David, you finally got your answer. The OHL is back up.
Absolutely. Great news. Hi there, Minister. Hope you're doing well. You've mentioned for fans in the stands that you were talking through the issue, and you have 7 or 8 people on this panel. Can you give more details about what kind of parameters they might be talking about here? What type of scenario we could be looking at here?
So there's a group of them that participated in the development of this framework, so we want to make sure that those who would be part of it were part of it. Unfortunately, we're not at a point where we can greenlight fans in stands at this moment, but we continue to work with them. They have submitted proposals. Many of them have submitted on their own, and then there was a group effort there, but I can't really speak to it at the moment because it has not, I've not received word from the Chief Medical Officer of Health on what he thinks may work or may not. So it would be premature for me to talk about what the parameters would be. It's too early.
Some jurisdictions they have looked at various forms of vaccine passports to help enable these kind of large scale events, people in stands, people at large concerts, and things like that. Do you support some kind of program like that so that fully vaccinated people can go to these events?
Well, look, we're certainly looking around the world and at different jurisdictions across North America to see what's working and where there haven't been major outbreaks. For example, in Barcelona, Spain, it's something the ministry is looking at. That was a live music concert. So we don't obviously want to make a decision just on sport alone. We want to make sure that when the decision is made, at least through this ministry, that it includes perhaps live music, performance arts, that sort of thing. So that's why we continue to look at that. They're very similar. And of course, when I go to make these presentations to the CMOH and the Jobs and Recovery Committee, we do make the linkages between both of those. So we are looking at what's happening around the world. But today's announcement is simply the return to play. A fans and stands protocol and what that might look like is a whiles away yet, but not too far into the distance.
Thank you. We'll go to the next question.
Your next question comes from Mo Fahim from Vista Radio. Please go ahead.
Hey, Mo.
Hi, I'm Minister. So just a quick clarification. So is because I jumped on the call maybe a minute late and maybe I missed it at the beginning. Apologies if that happened. So the return to play framework, is that kind of hand in hand with the province's reopening framework?
This is an accelerated path forward for 18 leagues and international sporting events that are aligned with the national sports organizations and Sport Canada. So effectively, it would allow our CFL teams, our NBA team, and our Major League Baseball team all to provide us with proposals with key features of the framework being laid out, which we believe they can meet, that were based on, in part, the NHL and AHL return to play. So this is separate and apart. It's an acceleration of the path forward, and we continue to look at our amateur, minor, and recreational sports through the various steps. And as I said, in step 1, they're able to start with dryland training and drills. Step 2, they'll be able to move toward more activity outdoors, and then finally a more robust return to play in step 3.
Follow-up?
So it's safe to say that it's independent of the reopening framework for the province?
Yeah, this would be very similar to the NHL and the AHL. Return to play where they were permitted. They took in stringent protocols. To my knowledge, no one tested positive in the teams, and when they were able to do the early screening, they were able to catch that, so there was no spread, no outbreaks. And so we want to ensure that as we encourage a return to play for our professional and elite amateur athletes, that they have the same level of integrity built in to their return to play protocols, which is what this framework is about today.
Thank you. We'll go to the next question.
Your next question comes from Kimberly Molina from CBC Ottawa. Please go ahead.
Hi, Kimberly.
Hi, Minister. I was hoping that you could clarify when would be the absolute soonest that teams could be back on the pitch or the court?
As quickly as they can get their local buy-in and they meet the protocols here. Many of them have been working on this for some time, so my hope is in the next couple of weeks, as we really finalize the regulations, that these plans come in place. We met with the group, I believe, last week or the week before, just to make sure that they were prepared and knew where we were headed with this, and they've been very helpful. So, we have been meeting, as I said, with the Blue Jays and the 3 CFL teams, MLSC and others, in order to ensure that we would have buy-in and that they would see where we were coming from, but also look and listen to their concerns. And so I think we've landed in a place that everyone will be able to meet these thresholds. It will be based on them and their timing, and again, the support of their local public health unit.
Follow-up?
So potentially, sorry, well, just to make sure I understand, so potentially like end of June, early July could be a possibility?
Well, that's my hope. Again, I couldn't, there's 18 different leagues and they all have different teams. And of course, we also have the international sporting events, so like the National Bank Cup for tennis. So they would all have to provide us with their details and make sure that they're in compliance with those. But I'm certainly hopeful, but it really will be determined by them. For example, the Blue Jays may not want to come home at this point in time, and the federal government may not allow that. So I wouldn't be able to comment on each one of their specifics, just today that we do have a framework for them so that they can return to play if they so choose.
Thank you. We'll go to the next question.
Your next question comes from Bruce Garowich from Post Media Ottawa. Bruce, please go ahead.
Hi, Bruce.
Hi, Lisa. Just a couple things from me. Do you anticipate that when fans do return, it will be a gradual return? Meaning we won't see full stadiums right away?
Bruce, it's probably premature for me to comment, but just based on some of the things that we're dealing with what an amusement park would look like being reopened, or a tour boat operator, or even with the restaurants and the retail being reopened, we're looking at capacity limits. And so I think it would be safe to say that in the absence of eradicating COVID-19, that we will take a measured approach.
What?
Just on what you announced today, there seems to be a lot of uncertainty, but why are you so optimistic that this is a path forward?
Well, I think that, first of all, we've been working with these organizations, the bulk of them, for the past 16 months. So we recognize their desire to return to play in a safe way and get their athletes back onto the field. We had conversations as early as last week on what the key features of the framework would look like. They were successful with the AHL and the NHL. So as long as we start to meet these thresholds and criteria, I'm optimistic that we'll get them back onto fields and ice pads and pitches in short order, and looking forward to seeing that as a return to play. But I think that this after last Friday, when the province started to slowly reopen, I think there was a lot of optimism, and I regarded that as very positive news. And although I've been at the legislature for the past couple of days and not at home in Ottawa, I think the sense that I'm seeing here in Toronto is that people are relieved to finally be able to get together and participate in some of the old things that they used to participate in. And I'm sure that's the case at home as well when I was there last week, with people getting excited about going onto patios and that sort of thing. I think that the return to play is going to be absolutely critical, particularly for our professional and our elite amateur athletes. And I think that this is a stable process that allows for them to do that return in a way that both meets the integrity of the public health protocols, but at the same time allows for them to be back on the pitch or the field or the ice pad.
Thank you. And this will be the last question before we go to anyone live in the room. Final question.
Your last question comes from Raphael Guillemette from Radio Canada. Please go ahead.
Hey, Raphael.
Hi, Minister McLeod. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good to hear from you again.
All right. Well, you've answered a couple of my questions already, but I'm wondering about the National Bank Open. It was stated before that they would be much reliant on, fans being back for that event to actually take place. It would be early August, obviously. How confident are you that a return for fans, enough for that event to take place would be possible then? I know it's a lot of projections and scenarios, but hypothetically, do you think that it's feasible?
Well, look, I think certainly looking at what outdoors would be is something that I would be more optimistic than an indoor. We continue to have these conversations with the Chief Medical Officer of Health about what capacity limits would look like. I recognize that in many sports, whether that's motorsports, horse racing, or even the National Cup Open, they really are driven by ticket sales and having people actually watch the event. And some other sports have different models. So these are very much things that we take into consideration when we're having those conversations with the CMOH. That said, I think it's too premature at the moment to say what that would look like and what that capacity limit would look like if we did proceed that way. We just continue to have those conversations, and again, it really is a sport issue, but also one about live music and performance and visual arts, and quite frankly, for our museums and others, which would be reopened in step 3. So we'll continue to have that conversation. It's just that's not the decision point that we're talking about today.
Follow up.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
And we'll go to any live questions in the room.
Minister.
Hi, Jamie.
Hey, Minister, how are you? How's the weekend?
What did you think about my mask?
I see that. I saw that. Amazing. I'm not going to mention you being a Toronto Maple Leaf fan for a few minutes, too. But
strike that from the record.
What I'm asking about, what does this mean for little Johnny that wants to play baseball or little Sarah that wants to get onto her soccer team? We know kids during COVID, there's been a lot of concern about their well-being.
Yeah, obviously as a hockey mom and trainer myself, I'd love to see my daughter back onto the rink. She has not been active in hockey since January. So I understand where parents are coming from, whether they're a dance mom, their child is in gymnastics, cheerleading, or they're playing lacrosse or basketball at the minor recreational league. The steps are very clear and laid out. They can start their dryland training as well as the drills here in step 1. Hopefully we'll advance in the next couple of weeks into step 2, in which case they can have a limited capacity of kids playing and getting back, and then finally in step 3 a more advanced ability for them to play both indoors and outdoors. So my hope is we continue to see the numbers go down across Ontario. We continue to see the vaccinations go up, and we get to a place later this summer where there will be a more full return to play model for all of our children across the great province of Ontario. And so I feel like that's very important for both the mental and physical well-being of our children, and I think it's also going to be important for our social recovery as a province.
And Minister, this next question crosses both areas of your portfolio. When the Leafs lost, the CN Tower flashed the Habs color. and I'm just wondering if that was appropriate given the pain that Leaf fans are feeling right now. And also, what would happen if Ottawa lost to Montreal and they flashed the colors in Ottawa of the Habs colors, or if Calgary lost and they flashed the colors of the Leafs on a federal building?
Well, I'll say this. I felt very bad for my Senators. I felt very bad for my Leafs. And hopefully next year we'll see a Stanley Cup. But we still have some great teams that are playing right now south of the border. So our Toronto Raptors and our Toronto Blue Jays. So let's hope that they do well. But I will say I had a fun exchange last night with my friend, the mayor of Niagara Falls. He pointed out that they were going to light the falls up in the Habs colors last night, and I had to say, "Lo what?" Anyway,
I have a question. So, how do you believe this framework could it change or expand as we go into stage 2 or 3? Do you see any changes possibly to help benefit, athletes?
Yeah, I don't see any changes to this framework. What I do see are changes to our ability to get to the different steps so that we can get a broader return to play for amateur, recreational, and minor sports. That's, I think, the big thing here. We've learned a lot. I'm proud of the fact that we became the first jurisdiction in Canada and one of the first in North America to get our high-performance athletes up in training. And so our Olympians were ready before others, and I think that was really important. So as they go to Tokyo, that experience has helped us build. We had the benefit of having an NBA team in Ontario, so a lot of our return to play protocols through MLSE occurred because the NBA was so robust, and so we were able to actually open our training and conditioning camps, the first in Ontario, first in Canada and one of the first in North America as a result of that. And we've gotten we had thousands of donated Pfizer vaccines for our Olympians. We were able to get them inoculated so they could be safe in Tokyo. We did the NHL bubble, and then we did the Canadian Hockey League, I guess, or division for the NHL and the AHL. So we've been doing a lot of work, and I think we've landed here at a very good space in order for a broader return to play for more sports and more professional and elite amateur athletes. And then I think through the various steps over the summer, we'll start to see a broader return to play for our young athletes. And that remains a priority for me and our ministry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Go Argos. Oh, geez, you got me. The Red Blacks won't talk to me. Thanks, everyone.